So, and around that time, God was revealing, I think, certain gifts in me that I didn't know I had, and I kind of started like diving deeper into that, and the deeper that I went into that, the more it pulled me away from my plan going
Sure.
into law, so to speak. So I made the shift directly after college. I had already took the LSAT, knew what law school, well, what college I was gonna go to. I mean, not college, law school I was gonna go to, and then like right before like crunch time, I was kind of like, all right, I hear you, Lord. I don't understand it. Let me just make the switch. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well done. That's great. I want to speak about bridging the communication gap
Hmm.
between the younger generation and the maturer generation.
Hmm.
There was a research actually um, that was done, and it says that 58% of young people feel misunderstood by older generations. Um, what's your thoughts about that in terms of young people being misunderstood?
I can definitely see that because one, it's we're living in a different world, right? Like social media, even prior 2013, social media wasn't really a thing, and that was when I graduated high school, and I remember Um, in middle school, all we had was MySpace, and then high school, Facebook had became a thing, and so I feel like that's when we really like the world really started getting a taste of, social media, and it kind of started to become like very ingrained in our everyday life. And nowadays, that's essentially what this new generation and some of my generation is still experiencing. And I think our parents, because they didn't have to deal with that, there may be some things that they just don't understand. So a lot of things get kind of lost in translation. It's like, well, why are you always on Instagram? Why are you always on your TikTok? And it's just like, for them, it's kind of like, this is just what we do. Their whole world is on that. People are barely going outside. You're just, you're talking to your friends through social media. You're seeing the world through social media in a sense, and it's kind of building up your view of what life should be and what the world should look like and how people should interact. So I think you're just kind of seeing like those two opposing sides like trying to reconcile with each other and figure they just don't understand, like,
Sure.
you know.
So you're saying it's coming from such a different perspective
Mhm.
that the maturer generation failed to recognize
Mhm.
how things may have evolved or changed or developed.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, they may say it's wrong, but to the generations, it's not wrong, it's just different.
Mhm.
Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for them, it's just this is just life,
sure.
and they're not wrong in that it is life. This is, I think the struggle with the 2 generations is for like the older generations are constantly, not everyone, of course, but there's a consistent, back in my day, we did it like this, and it's like, we're not in your day anymore, you know? Things are not run that way, and with the younger generation, it's very much so like I think sometimes we can fail to realize that while the world around us is evolving and it's changing, this we're dealing with the same issues. People were still depressed in the 80s. People were even if they didn't call it depression, people were dealing with the same emotions, we're fighting the same battles. It's just technology and the landscape around it, it's different. So it manifests a little bit differently, or you kind of have to deal with it a little bit more different than maybe how you would have before.
That makes perfect sense. How do you think the younger generation can communicate with the older generation without losing their identity?
Mm. I think one, sharing perspective is always important. Like with your younger generation, I feel like you can you can put your parents, or you can put your aunts and uncles or your mentor, whoever it is, you can teach them about, social media. You can teach them the latest trends and stuff like that. Not necessarily so they can be involved in it, but at the very least so they can understand it. So now when they're approaching you, they're not coming from this foreign perspective. They're coming from a little bit more an empathetic and a place of more understanding, you know? I
That's good.
I think that it starts there, like just information sharing on both ends.
Sure. So information going back and forth so that there can be a greater level of understanding.
Mhm.
Um, what traditions or principles do you believe the older generation um, tried to instill or download to the younger generation that you think is valuable?
Mm. For one, I'll say one of the things that you see we're struggling with in modern day society, gender roles.
Yeah,
I feel like that gets a negative connotation now, and it shouldn't because it's biblical. God made Adam and Eve, and they had very specific functions. And throughout the Bible, man has a very specific function, and a woman has a very specific function. It's not to say one is lesser than the other, but we complement each other. And I think nowadays, what you see is there's a group of women who are competing with men, and there's a group of men who are kind of like sitting down, sitting back, and not taking on the responsibility that they should. So I think that's one of the things that the older generations should definitely continue instilling as in their kids and the youth in general. If you're working with kids or something, it's just allowing them to see that it's okay to embrace, you being a man or and her being a woman. Like that's how society, a healthy society should function.
sure.
So gender roles for sure, and I would say coupled with that, marriage. I think nowadays there's an overwhelming majority of people who say they don't wanna get married, but I think they actually do. But I think society has told them, "You don't need somebody to tether you down or to kinda keep you from being able to explore what life has to offer." Whereas it's like, "No, this is a union protected by God, and if you embrace it, you can both build each other up." And the whole point of marriage is to save the institution of family, So it's a very special union. I don't think people realize that anymore. You have people treating their girlfriends or their boyfriends like they would their spouse. And it's like you can love your girlfriend and boyfriend, all that is fine, but understand there is a difference. Like you guys have not sanctified that union as of yet. So I think without going down like a rabbit hole of that, just understanding and respecting, things like that, respecting gender roles, respecting marriage. Those are two top of mind that I feel like are most valuable and needed in today's culture.
Wow, that's powerful. I absolutely agree. I think that some of these values are being lost and blurred, and as a result of that, you may get a weaker society,
Mhm.
and that's a real issue. So I believe some of that needs to be, addressed and embraced so that we can sort of move forward in that. What are some of the points, I can't say traditions now, but some of the principles you think the older generation can learn from the younger generation? Now, we understand that being a younger person, we're going to learn more
Mhm.
usually from those who are more advanced. They've seen more, they've been through more, they've experienced more. And so that's just a reality of the situation. However, there are still learning curves
Yeah.
and learning points that can be adopted and actually can help the shelf life as well. I was speaking to or on the phone with two bishops, and um, notable, and one of the things they said on the phone was that the younger generation helps them stay relevant and helps their shelf life and gives them vitality. So I thought that was quite poignant and interesting in the way that they spoke about it, because I was really there to learn, but they was also saying their points that they can learn as well. So what just a couple of things you think the older generation may be able to learn or grasp from the younger generation.
One, I think the younger generation can help the older generation stay, what's the word? Innovative. The older generations, I feel like oftentimes you can get set in your ways if you've been doing something a certain way a long time. And so I feel like generations now are much more open-minded. And of course that has its pitfalls, but in general, it's a good thing to be open-minded. It's a good thing to be able to see things from different perspectives. And I think one of the benefits of living in a social media society, you're able to see so many different walks of life. And while it can be information overload at times, what you are being able to pull from that is, okay, they do things like this over here, and they do things like this over there. And it allows you to kind of be more not accepting, but rather empathetic to other people who may be experiencing life in different ways and in different regions of the world. So I think younger people have been able to develop that, and that's something that they can give to some of the older generations to help them not stay so stuck in their ways, and make them a little bit less judgmental, at least come across less judgmental.
The first family that was under attack was Adam and Eve,
Yes,
with the fruit in the
with the
garden,
fruit,
Cain and
yes.
Abel, and etc. So the enemy has always been trying to attack
Always,
family.
always.
How
Because
do
families are stronger together,
they really are?
and the
They
enemy
build
knows
powerful
that.
networks. Yeah, most of the top companies that we admire are
Yeah,
actually
family
families,
owned.
or were, and then they
Mhm.
evolved into huge conglomerates.
Yeah,
So, but there's a lot of conflict in families now.
yeah.
Where do you believe that the conflicts are generated because of demonic attacks and also society pressures? Is
I
that
think
where
it's a
you believe
combination
it's
of
coming
both.
from both?
It's a combination of both, because you're going to have the demonic attacks, right? Especially when there's an anointing on your life. When you're doing the work that, like I like to say, this is God work, right? Because when you're a social worker, it's not the best paid position, right? That one could choose. But again, I come from a place of just wanting to help people because I know people are hurting. Once upon a time, I was hurting and I didn't know the resources and the things that were out there that was available to me. So it made me want to be that change agent that I wanted to see in the world. So that's the reason I chose this profession. And since being in this profession, it's humbling, right? Because you speak to
It's
so many
strategic
different
too.
people. Very.
Yeah.
You speak to so many different people and they're going through life not realizing that they have the ability to come out of their current circumstance. Because
Mm,
oftentimes you look at your circumstance and you look at it like it's so big, not realizing God is big.
right.
He's bigger than every circumstance you could ever imagine going through.
Wow.
So if you challenge prayer in those moments of circumstance, you'll be surprised how things can change in your favor.
That's awesome. I love it. Listen, we're dealing with this, and this has been an awesome, awesome episode. And we're continuing to speak about the need for family and connectivity and how important the family is. Akeisha, let me ask you this.
Yes.
There is conflicts in family,
Yes, there
and
is.
some of them are very deep
Yeah.
and broad.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, again, an escalation and uplift in it. How are these conflicts solved? Because they run, you can choose your friends.
Correct. But you can't choose your family.
You can't choose your family. So what are the steps, or how do you believe, from, your profession, and also you're not just, it's not just your profession, but spiritually,
Yeah.
you're connected. And I'm looking at what you do as ministry as well.
Oh, thank you.
how do you resolve conflicts?
So conflict is difficult. We have to address it first, and we have to be willing to be honest and authentic in how we address conflict. So that means if I'm having an issue with my brother because I think he received more from mom and dad growing up than I did, because oftentimes this is what I deal with when I do family therapy. I have a table of maybe 6 people around me, the immediate family members, and they're all arguing back and forth.
That's what I wanted to ask you. So how do you distinguish who's wrong and right in this sort of melee of
So
accusations?
that's the thing. It's very difficult because you can't say, I'm siding with you. I'm not siding with you, because now you cause like a rupture in that therapeutic relationship, because now I'm going to sit at the table upset because I feel like you're listening to the women more than the men at the table, and you're siding with them because of your gender, because that happens.
But what if you see someone who's clearly wrong?
Well, then I pose it back to the people at the table, because remember, this is family therapy. I don't go home with you guys. You guys know the family better than I do.
Wow.
So if you say to me, this person is constantly like, bringing me down, and they say like negative things to me all the time, I'm going to go around and say, so does anyone else at the table feel this way? And what can we address at this moment that can maybe help this family member understand that sometimes they come from a negative space, and sometimes it's hard for you to receive that negative space that they're coming from, right? So just being authentic again with the communication, and being willing to say whatever it is that's on your mind, even if it's going to piss the next person off.
Wow. That is incredible. And so you would go in and you would try and get them to connect and try and bring things out and bring
Before we
healing.
can connect, though, we have to address what's on the surface that's causing the disconnection. And oftentimes, you'll be surprised, people don't realize what's causing the disconnection. They just know it's a disconnect. Oftentimes, when I get these referrals for family therapy, in the subject, it says communication breakdown. What does that mean?
That's broad.
Exactly. It doesn't really tell me what's the issue with the family. So it's not until the family sits in front of me and they're like, oh, we're having a communication breakdown. And then I'm sitting here and I'm asking these motivational interviewing questions where it's like open-ended questions, right? So it gives you the chance to answer, and then I can counter with something else right after. And while I'm doing this, it's like, you guys are communicating wonderfully.
And I
That's the
find,
problem.
yeah, but I also find as a pastor, and sometimes when I'm, speaking to people, counseling, that communication's bad. They come out with what the issue is when I'm there,
Yeah.
but they couldn't do it together. And people carry things but are unwilling to tell the other
Yes.
person, and start penalizing each other
Yes.
based upon what they're not happy about, but not
But not
displayed
speaking
it.
about it.
I don't understand why there is such a communication barrier.
And it happens more often than you'll think, believe it or not, because oftentimes you have family members that are holding on to things from their childhood. I have a
Wow.
family that I'm working with, and this is my family of 6. And the adults are one is in their 40s, one is in their late 30s, and they're still arguing about how they were treated as children. The fact
Wow.
that I find my mother poured more into my brother than she did for me. And now I'm still at home and she's upset with me about it. And it's like, I get that, but what can we explore differently, right? Because you're still in a place of childhood. And granted, yeah, we live in our childhood still, because many things happened outside of our control, especially if you experience like any kind of abuse, whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse. Those things live within you because trauma lives on your person. It lives in your body, and you carry it with you every time you walk into a room. So if I have trauma from my childhood, and it's trauma from like whether it's daddy issues or mommy issues, every room I step into, I take my trauma with me, and my trauma speaks when I speak.
Wow.
So you have to be conscious of just yourself and the things that you've been through, and maybe seeking help, right? If it's beyond you, if it's beyond your scope of expertise, to feel better about whatever that situation is, because forgiveness is key. We
Wow.
have to know how to forgive.
So you're saying forgiveness is one of the keys to getting past trauma.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because think about it. If you just live in the trauma that happened to you all those years ago in your childhood, the person may not even be here anymore that caused you to have the trauma that you're experiencing now, right? So you're going to live the rest of your life in an angry kind of stance. and this person is not even here anymore, or 9 times out of 10 this person still is around, but they're living their life not even thinking about whatever it is that you're, still dealing with that happened all those years ago. So it would just benefit yourself to kind of address whatever those emotional needs are that were unmet in childhood, whether it's from your mom, whether it's from your father. And it's difficult when it's from those people, because those are the people that we look at like that's supposed to love us, right?
Sure.
Like you said, we don't get to choose our family. We don't get to choose who our mom and dad will be.
Mm.
But what I learned, and my pastor, God bless him, he was able to help me learn this, and he helps me to forgive, right? The people in my life that I felt like wronged me, because I was holding on to the things that happened, and it's like drinking poison expecting someone else to die. So it doesn't benefit you.
Yeah,
And unforgiveness, it's a silent killer.
it is.
That's where, people hold on to things in their mind. Before you know it, you have a stroke, and you're battling all these different things in your livelihood because of the things that you just kept silently and didn't voice.
It's true. Cancer, it just wells up in you and brings out sickness. It's
And then
not,
with the Caribbean families, a lot of families, as far as the trauma is concerned, if it's like a sexual trauma, that's hidden under the rug. It's like we don't address that. And kids.
and then other family members get upset if a family member who was abused then mentions it, and that just exacerbates.
Yes,
and
it continues to
causes-
perpetuate this cycle of secrecy. And
'Cause
in
it's not
secrecy,
addressed, yeah.
exactly. In secrecy, you allow that person that's dealing with that trauma to now, inherit and feel like they're the cause of that trauma. So now they walk around with this shame on them because of what happened to them. That was out of their control, because usually this sexual trauma happens in your formative age. So at 5 and 6, no one's supposed to be sexually abusing you.
Yeah.
But again, that comes from knowledge, right? That comes from mom, dad, or your caregiver teaching you about touch, healthy touch versus bad touch, and knowing the difference, so that if something does happen, right, and then teaching your kids no secrets. You
Yeah.
can tell mommy and daddy and your caregiver anything, because one of the things that abusers do is they threaten to harm mom and dad,
Wow.
or they threaten to harm you. So now you're walking around with this secret and still going through the abuse because you're scared of what can potentially happen.
Wow.
Basketball squad, yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, how did you find it transitioning from traveling everywhere to staying put as a local pastor?
I think moments where I was missing out,
Okay.
because you live in New York. It's high on demand when it comes to expense. We had a mortgage to pay. We got childcare to take care of. And we often say it like, if you don't work, you can't eat.
Right.
So I was constantly on the go.
Sure.
Many times that I've missed significant moments for our family. There was times that I was gone on Mother's Day. There's times that I was gone moments for our children, whether it's childcare, graduation, or things of that nature. So the sacrifice that we had to make, and specifically in terms of me always going, myself always traveling, was very taxing on us,
So,
to the point that it really grew to say that, you know what, I don't see myself doing this for long.
sure.
I don't want to go out and save the world and jeopardize my family,
That's-
because I was raised in a culture where sacrifice that showed, indirectly putting your family to the side.
Sure.
Because
So
you got to do the work
So
of
you
God.
was raised in a culture where what ministry comes first,
Right. Ministry.
and family will work itself. out.
Correct. If you sacrifice for God, if you, take
He'll
up
do
your
the
cross,
rest.
he'll, this
Sure.
the call is for Christ. Your marriage is gonna be all right. Your children,
Yeah.
no,
It doesn't work that way.
no. And I believe that if I was continue going the way I was going before, I probably would not be where I am right now in terms of our family. And just so we've learned a lot as we grew into our own becoming, pastoring, and that really helped us, because at the end of the day, your wife can't see your heart. Your wife sees your schedule.
Sure.
So I didn't have a heart problem. I had a schedule problem. I just had to learn how to adjust. I had to learn how to cheat so that, number one, God remains priority in my life, but also it's God, family, and church, not God, church, and family.
Sure. So
Yeah.
getting that priority in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's people watching now,
Yeah.
and some may not be struggling to balance ministry, but maybe a job or education or a business, and they may be out of sequence because something you said that's very powerful. The Bible clearly illustrates that after God comes family,
Right.
and then the rest falls into place.
Mhm.
But if we have it out of position, then that can be a real problem.
Sure.
I want to ask you this question. Did you, in your time of being busy and having a very busy schedule, did you ever feel guilty? You mentioned Mother's Day you missed, and maybe birthdays for some of your sons, perhaps. Sometimes
Graduations, birthdays for the most part. I believe I was there.
Sure.
But there was one particular Mother's Day weekend that I was literally on the other side of the country. I was in San Francisco
Wow.
preaching for the weekend, and that particular Sunday was Mother's Day.
Wow.
And I think that's what really convicted me and drove me to a place where, I had to make honest assessments
Sure.
of our lives and where we are in ministry, and being an evangelist, obviously you're a full-time, preacher traveling nonstop. So
So did you feel guilty about missing those occasions?
many times, absolutely, because, you want to be home with your family,
Yeah.
but again, being raised in a culture there where you sacrifice for the things of God and do the work of God. But, as you grow and you know for yourself, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, as opposed of, everything's going to be all right. God will take care of, just do the work of God and go, go, go. And I wasn't able to see my family and spend time with my wife and see our boys being raised. It was always in and out, going nonstop.
So people who are watching now, there
Mm-hmm.
are some who have families, but their careers
Yeah.
or ministries or whatever they have is so important. How would you encourage them, or what would you say for them to reconfigure their lives so that their kids are not sort of being brought up by others,
Yeah.
and or their spouses feeling neglected and
Right.
rejected? What would you say they need to do to have this priority in place?
I think really one needs to understand that there's a difference between what's being builded, or what's being destroyed. There's things that are worth building, but there are other things that are worth being destroyed.
Sure.
And the Bible, we can go to the Word of God because it really details, many people that build things. We can talk about Abraham that built an altar, and David that built an altar, and Noah built the ark to the saving of his house, his family. But there are other men that built things to the detriment of their lives. Nebuchadnezzar and, Samson. These individuals, men, built things, but it wasn't beneficial to them.
Right.
So it leads me to, the story of Moses and Joshua. Pretty much Moses is gone. He's died, and Joshua is just this young, energetic leader, anointed of God. He's got the ark of God with him, and he's ready to cross over. He has the priesthood, he has the people, he has the armies, and we have the ark, and we're ready to cross over to Jordan. And we talk about, the Jericho walls being, falling, marching around the wall 6 times, and then they shout. They're
Yeah.
in silence, but they shout the 7th time the walls come down. But every time that there's a Jericho in our lives, there's always a stipulation that God puts on us to ensure that what is intended to be torn down or brought down in our lives, it's not rebuilt again.
Sure.
And I think that story really comes from Joshua 6, where Joshua tells the people that cursed is the man before the Lord who rises and tries to rebuild the city of Jericho.
Mm.
But it doesn't stop there. The scripture also tells us that the firstborn will be sacrificed in the foundation of laying up the city again. And the young son will be set in the gate with it. In other words, trying to rebuild what God has intended to be torn down in your life could be at the cost of your own sons.
Wow.
You can sacrifice your family. So the question for the listeners tonight could be simply, what are you trying to rebuild?
Wow.
And what you're trying to build, at what expense is it gonna cost you?
Wow.
I mean, build a career, build wealth, build a business,
Put it in its proper place.
Put it in its proper place, because if not, then we can rebuild to the point where we sacrifice the very thing that we're needing the most.
Wow. That's a powerful scripture and analysis. Moving on, as a pastor, a stat says that 70% of pastors feel like they don't have close friends.
Mm.
What's your feelings about that, and what's your experience? Because a pastor cannot be friends with his or her congregants.
Right.
There has to be and again, raising your sons, you can't be both their friends and parents, because when you're parenting, you need to have some sort of authority, and they need to have accountability. And if you're too friendly, then that becomes diluted.
Right. So
I'm saying that to say, as a pastor, what do you feel about this friend shortage?
As pastors, and I can only speak for myself, that, we can go through a lot of discouragement.
Yes.
We can feel like, they often say it's lonely on top, that you have no one to, bond with and really be yourself around.
Yeah.
Because there's an image that you've got to uphold. You're a pastor in front of everyone. I can't be Omar Jolly to the sanctuary. I've got to be Pastor Omar Jolly. So we fight discouragement, and with discouragement, it comes, sometimes we don't know who to call, we don't know who to talk to, so we battle loneliness at times. I think for me, I've learned to build relationships outside of the church.
That's what I've done. I'm glad you said that.
And back then, that could have been looked at like, maybe not so spiritual.
Yeah, but obviously friends who are progressive, and so forth. But I build friends in business.
Right, absolutely.
In different arenas.
And they respect you. They know who you are. They respect you. But also there's, when it comes to the business side of things, being heavily involved with sports and being a referee, I've got an amazing community of friends that know who I am as pastor, but we work together on the court, and we spend time together, and our families know each other. So it's really created that balance for me, that, outside of church and ministry, there's a healthy unplug and detachment. That there's another community that necessarily may not be in the four walls or in the four walls of the church, but it creates that balance, that you can share and be together and have that bond. So
I'm glad. That's good. I agree. I think that we can be friends with people in different arenas.
I believe that.
Lawyers, accountants,
Absolutely.
business people, sports, like you said, and they can be healthy and wholesome.
Right.
And we're saying this as well. So we've got to be very selective on our friendships. What about burnout? People, again, are watching, and there are some that are doing 2 and 3 jobs and also raising family and also doing church and also doing ministry. It gets very taxing and tiresome. And that burnout then has a repercussion on the family. How do we, again, make sure that we protect ourselves from burnout, doing too much, holding too much, micromanaging, when we should really be living, the abundant life?
Right. Learning how to reset.
Wow. It's
Yes,
been
sir.
such an honor, you coming in, and
Thank you
we've
for
heard
having me.
about that. And in terms of the balance and family, we'll definitely have you back.
Love to come
It's
back. Thank you so
been a
much.
real blessing. Listen, to everyone, you've been watching us online. We have had a absolutely wonderful episode on speaking about balancing family and ministry, or balancing family and job and career. And it's been an awesome occasion. Again, I want to invite you specifically to come along on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. so you can be a part of our awesome Sunday service. Worship is extraordinary. The word is power-packed, and someone will meet you there right at the door. So I want you to come along to that. You're also watching. Can I please encourage you to give? Because this helps us to continue to take the ministry literally all over the world and within the New York area. So I want you to be a blessing. The QR code is on the screen. So I want you to tap into that and be a part of what we're doing. And lastly, let me say our new website has been launched. And again, the website is on the screen. Why don't you log on to that and just see what the ministry is doing, and let's navigate ourselves around so we can do what God needs us to do. Listen, stay blessed and favored of God. We will be back with another episode, and we know that your life will change for the better. God bless you, and heaven smile on you.
It is our desire to keep you posted on what's happening here at Changing Lives Christian Center. So please pull out your smart devices so you can take notes and save dates.
The time frame to submit a request for your year-end statement is now closed. Please join Pastors Paul and Yasmin Mitchell and our CLCC church family as we celebrate our new members during service. And then join us after service in our fellowship hall as we spend time with all new members. CLCC and New York City Council member Chris Banks presents Community Outreach, hosted by CLCC's healthcare team, Saturday, August 16th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's a one-day community health fair with food, fun, free health screenings, CPR training, blood pressure testing, giveaways, back-to-school supplies, face painting, and much more. Medical professionals on site for Q&As, activities for all ages. This will be a free event, so save the date. Visit the info desk for more details.
Do you need prayer? It doesn't matter for what. CLCC is here to stand in prayer with you and for you. Let's take it to the Lord, for He cares about all of the needs you have. God has commanded us to always pray and not faint. His word declares that when we pray, believing, that He will always answer. So join CLCC's prayer leaders Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. That's right, 30 minutes for prayer and encouragement to start your day. We look forward to you calling into our conference prayer line, 646-769-9900. Access code 82551. Remember, come and dial believing. The Master awaits your prayer request.
Join CLCC in remembrance of current world events.